Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we are going to do the meditation, loving kindness meditation, a few minutes. After the meditation, Subodha is going to give a Dhamma talk. End of the Dhamma talk, question and answer. Last item is chanting. Right now, Reverend Chandasara is going to lead the meditation.
Please be comfortable now to spread loving kindness thoughts. Sit in a comfortable, upright posture, and then get ready to practice loving kindness meditation. Before that, we breathe in and breathe out comfortably for 3 times each. Okay, let's spread loving kindness meditation in this way. May all the living beings be physically healthy. May all the living beings be free from incoming disturbances. May all the living beings be mentally healthy. We continue spreading loving kindness thoughts in this way until we hear the bell sound. Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now it's time for the Dhamma talk. Today our speaker is Subodha. Good morning, Subodha.
Good morning, Bhante.
Yeah, before you start talk, give me 1 more minute to announce other 2 programs this month. So next Sunday, which is 22nd, is Dhamma talk going to give a Sanatha Vihari, Mexican-American Buddhist monk. The 29th, we're going to celebrate the Ulambana service, which is the offering merit for the departed relatives. We're going to do the backyard behind the sendo, following all the rules and regulation, health regulation. And we're going to provide the food for everybody, done for the monks after the service. I am planning, I hope at least around 8 monks will be here. And we provide lunch, vegetarian, maybe non-vegetarian also, I'm not sure right now. It's going to be outside also. Please come and join everybody at 29. Parking available, limited parking inside our parking lot, but you can park outside also, I mean street parking. Please make sure come and join that program. Subodha, you can start your Dhamma talk right now.
Thank you, Bhante. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. So next week is my last class with my young Dharma students. I spoke a few weeks ago about these classes that I've been helping with. A Vietnamese nun, a friend of mine, has been in charge of the Dharma school at her temple for a long time. And the summer being what it is and all the responsibilities that she has, she needed a little extra help. And so I've been helping out. And next week is the final class before all of the students go back to school and are too busy to spend their Thursday evenings in Dharma school. And we've been covering the Eightfold Path, which means that this final class we've got together will be on both mindfulness and concentration, the last 2 of the list of 8 in the Eightfold Path. And it will be interesting to share this with them, to teach them on mindfulness and concentration. And I think part of the interest for me, and maybe some of the excitement even, is that because they're so young, there's so much less for them to unlearn in learning about mindfulness and concentration. I was thinking about my own time as a Dharma student over the course of, at this point, most of my life, and the various things that I've learned, and then all the other things I've had to unlearn over the course of that time. And it seems like a continual process of filling the cup and then emptying it repeatedly. Until I found teachers that I could really trust, that I felt that I could trust. And at that point, I completely emptied the cup to its very last drop and started all over again, building up brick by brick the foundations of my understanding of the Dharma. And then from there, I've continued study and practice. But in all that time, I started thinking back to something that I had read really early on when I was still pretty young. And it's a book called Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Some of you may have read it. The book was originally published in 1980, and I read it when it had already been out for about 20 years or so. And that itself was 20 years ago. So this book has been around for about 40 years plus, I think, which is pretty amazing. At the time it was written in 1980, a lot of the things that the book had to talk about were really novel ideas, like, hey, being a vegetarian and practicing Tai Chi and meditation and all these like really cool ideas that at the time, some people had known about for a long time, but I think the mainstream, it was still pretty fresh. By the time I started reading it 20 years later, it seemed pretty new and interesting to me. But then since then, I've continued to reread the book from time to time. And it feels a bit dated now. And it feels even cliche in parts, but I still enjoy it, even though spiritually, religiously, philosophically speaking, I take different lessons now than what's in that book. I still enjoy it. In fact, the last time I think I read it to my wife, because she finds my voice very calming. So sometimes at night I'll read out loud for a little bit, so she'll get sleepy and we can go to bed. And so I read Way of the Peaceful Warrior out loud a little bit at a time in the evenings until we finished the whole book. Now, if you don't know what the book is about, like I said, it was published in 1980, and it's written by a man named Dan Millman, and it's a novel of sorts, and you'll see why the of sorts, because it's written by Dan Millman about Dan Millman, who finds a teacher, and then Dan Millman becomes enlightened, which would forever make Dan Millman, in my head, the Kevin Costner of personal growth novels, because it did feel a bit like directed by Kevin Costner, written by Kevin Costner, starring Kevin Costner. And in this book, Dan is a young man going to college up in Berkeley. And he one night goes to a full service all night gas station and finds himself a guru, a teacher there, working there, teaching him lessons about life and meditation and philosophy. And one might say Dan finds himself a gas station guru. And in the course of this book, he learns a lot of things, but a lot of it seems very Buddhist or Buddhist adjacent. And there's this one part in the book that popped into my head as I was thinking about my students who are going to be learning about mindfulness and concentration. And it had everything to do with the present moment. So that'll be today's discussion overall, the power of the present moment. But perhaps different to and contrasted by what's in Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Because there's this one part in the book where Dan's gas station guru, that he is called Socrates, because he doesn't actually know the guy's name, he just gives him the name Socrates and he just rolls with it. So the Socrates at this point in the book has been giving Dan bumper sticker wisdom, aphorisms over and over again throughout the whole book, but finally tells Dan, Dan, it's your turn now. You got to give me some wisdom. So what you're going to do is you're going to go sit outside on a rock and sit there until you've got something worth saying. And so Dan goes out, sits on this rock, and starts meditating and starts thinking and starts pondering. And he comes up with one phrase after another, like, what about this thought? And what about that thought? And, his teacher says, no, that's not it. And he sends him back out. And then finally, Dan hits on this one thought, like, this is it. And he rushes to his teacher and says, I got it. There are no ordinary moments. And his teacher's like, yes, there we go. That's something. And then his lessons continue from there. And of course, when I read those words 20 plus years ago, it really did like stick out. Like, wow, there are no ordinary moments. Like, wow, that seems like really profound. Like, let's take a good look at that. And the thing is, it's not really a bad lesson. It's a good lesson to think about. A lot of us, especially in the West, feel too busy and too rushed. But I think at this point, we can even stop distinguishing between East and West. I think we're all in this global society living extremely busy lives all the time. We all feel rushed. And there is something quite pleasant and wonderful about setting aside a lot of the concerns and being here in the present moment. And so this idea of there being no ordinary moments is the very idea that every moment is worth being in fully. You don't have to try to rush off to be somewhere else or in the past or in the future, but like right here is sufficient, is enough. And at this point, I think for a lot of us, that's not a new teaching. That's not a new lesson. A lot of us have heard this in one form or another. You know, when I say bumper sticker wisdom, it literally is the kind of thing you can see, especially driving around Los Angeles on the back of someone's car. You can totally see it. I can picture it now. I'm on the 405 and there it is. There are no ordinary moments. And there is a certain power in recognizing the present moment, in recognizing where we are right here and right now. But I do think that there is this tendency to maybe mystify the present moment, or perhaps give it some kind of mystical layer that it is its own thing, and you need to be in it, and don't you dare have any thoughts while you're in it. You're thinking about the past, and that's bad. You're thinking about the future, and that's bad. You're thinking in general, and that's also bad. That the present moment is this thing that needs to be met non-conceptually, right? That thoughts are somehow a barrier between you and the present moment. And over time, that kind of mentality, that type of view about the present moment has become, for many of us, a distinctly Buddhist interpretation of how to interact with the present moment. And the thing is, when I try to find that particular perspective in Buddhism, especially in the Pali Canon, from the Buddhist perspective, I don't find that. I do find the importance of the present moment, but it comes about in much different ways. In fact, when people think about death meditation in Buddhism, they're quick to jump to the real scary, kooky, kind of gross stuff, you know, the contemplation of the foulness of the body. And people often mistake that as death meditation in the Pali Canon. That when the Buddha tells his disciples to go out to the charnel ground and go off to see where the bodies are sitting and watching them decay and become festering and smelly and breaking down to bones and dirt and dust, that itself is contemplation of death. But the whole thing is, when that's brought up in suttas, like that's in the Satipatthana Sutta, right? That's brought up as not meditation on death. That's brought up as contemplation of foulness of the body. It has a particular purpose in breaking up over-attachment and pleasure and delight and lust in the human body. Just enough, just to balance it out. It's not that the Buddha invented that particular kind of meditation. At that time, excuse me, there had been a lot of wandering ascetics who made it their practice to observe the dead and watch the bodies as they broke up, to break their attachment away from the body. But the Buddha taught his disciples to use it just enough to not have that kind of attachment, to expect any kind of true happiness and delight in the body, but just enough. But when it came to actual death meditation, it was always about giving his disciples incentive to practice here and now. Death meditation itself was actually about realizing that life is finite and that you don't know how much time you have, and you don't know the conditions of the future. You don't know what the future may bring, and you don't know what karma will come to fruit in the future. So whatever conditions of the past, whatever karma has brought you to this present moment is the one that you can practice in. This is the one where you have the power to practice, to develop good qualities of the mind. And that ends up being the true death meditation we find in the suttas, not looking at how gross the body is, not looking at bloated corpses out in the water, but recognizing that because of the fragility of life, we need to focus on right now. And then how we focus on right now matters as well. It's become quite common to think that the way one settles into the present moment is in a very, like I already said before, non-conceptual way, but further than that, that it's all about doing things with such complete deliberateness. Like I often joke, and I'm sure some of you heard it before, that these days mindfulness has become about how slow you can eat your oatmeal, right? And that is very much the way we view it now. It's that how much can I focus on this one movement, this one thing? How can I truly taste the peach or the plum or whatever without any thoughts getting in the way? But the thing is, the present moment is about attention. It is about being aware and looking at what's happening. But I don't think that's actually in a non-conceptual way. The Buddha would emphasize very strongly the whole concept of yoniso manasikara, right? Manasikara in this sense being attention. So yoniso, appropriate attention. Some scholars have even translated this differently as trying to think of the word, like conscientiousness or something like that. The idea of being, consideration, proper consideration. That's one way some scholars have translated that. Which, when you think about appropriate attention and proper consideration, none of that seems to be non-conceptual or not involving the mind or not thinking. And that's one of the things that I want to focus on, because truthfully, a lot of the thoughts we develop are how we start steering the mind towards the Dharma, and also how we start settling the mind into deeper states of tranquility and meditation. It's not by shutting the mind off. And also, I think too, that the way we view the mind ends up becoming very problematic too, that thoughts somehow aren't about what's going on right now. Ignoring the very fact that when you're thinking about the past, you're not in the past. Those are past thoughts in the present moment. And when you're thinking about the future, it's the same idea. You're not in the future. Those are thoughts about the future in the present moment, which means that those thoughts are the very things you can bring attention to, where your awareness can land. And I got to be frank here, that in that book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and then it got adapted into a movie, which I don't recommend. The book is great. I mean, even if you disagree with some of the teachings in there, go ahead and read the book. It's a good time. Socrates is a riot. He's a funny guy. Dan is dorky. He makes a lot of mistakes. Like, I remember this one part in the book where Dan's teacher, Socrates, tells Dan maybe it's time to start being a vegetarian and live a celibate life for a while. And Dan at this point is dating this one fellow student at his university. And he has to break the news to her by going to dinner that night at her house and saying, well, hey, we've been having a great time and I still want to hang out, but perhaps from now on, you should think of me as a priest, right? And of course, he never gets another call back to go on a date with her, right? But in any case, with all these different things in there is still this thing we can take away from the power of the present moment by applying appropriate attention. Specifically, when the Buddha brought it up, he would talk about how appropriate attention really comes down to the Four Noble Truths. Oftentimes, the way we understand the Four Noble Truths now is just these things to be memorized, but the Four Noble Truths bring us back to the present moment by actually looking at the way they're affecting our experience right now, the way they can bring us to freedom and peace and tranquility right now. When the Buddha would apply the Four Noble Truths in a meditative way, what he would do is, rather than just saying, there is suffering, suffering arises, it ceases, there's a path to its cessation and everything, he would actually look and say, this is suffering. This is the origination of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the path, when developed, that leads to the end of suffering. And by focusing on this, it's actually drawing back to the mind and body, where we want to be in the present moment. Not sometime in the future, not sometime when we can schedule a retreat or go to a temple, especially these days when that's pretty tough to do. It's one of the very reasons we're on Zoom right now, is because we don't have that ability to just go off somewhere right now, but we have the ability to be here in our minds and our bodies and apply appropriate attention. So then when we look at the Four Noble Truths in this way, we can see that the whole point is to really comprehend stress and suffering, to understand its nature, to abandon the causes when we see them arise, when we see them originate in the mind, right? To develop, or rather to realize the qualities of the mind that lead to peace, that lead to nibbana, and then to actually develop the qualities of the mind that are laid out in the Eightfold Path. And then that's the way we apply appropriate attention. And one of the things that I find really powerful about the way that the Buddha teaches this is that it's not a cookie cutter way of going about realization. It's not this thing that it's just this one method, this one tool, this one way, but rather a multitude of tools that we can apply in the present moment, which actually makes the present moment more engaging, something that we actually are more driven to pursue and practice with and develop. Because I have found in my own practice that when I've tried to have that very non-conceptual, very no thought, empty mind approach to meditation, that there doesn't really seem to be any development on my part. No real sense that I'm seeing any progress or growth or improvement, but rather just a lot of the same stuff happening every time. When we talk about defilements that arise in the mind, different restlessness, and sloth and torpor and all these things, sensual desire, all these things that come up. If you only apply the same technique, the same tool, the same way in every instance, and it doesn't work, then why continue with the same thing the same way? Oftentimes we talk about that as a kind of insanity, that when you do the same thing repeatedly over and over again and expect different results each time, like, why would that even happen? Why would it work that way? And why would it be the kind of thing that the Buddha would prescribe as a way out of suffering? These days, when people are taught to focus on the present moment, it does seem to be the kind of thing where it's the same technique applied. That all one needs is radical acceptance, and what one needs is to completely shut the brain off, not to think. I bring up Way of the Peaceful Warrior because it's kind of just a fun book. But there are other examples I could give where that has become the zeitgeist, might not be the right word for it, but the sort of flavor that has entered the conversation on mindfulness and on present moment awareness. That if you could just get your mind out of the way, then you could really be there. If all the concepts went away, as if you went to the grocery store and all the concepts of grocery store went away. You didn't even know where you were. It's like, wow, look at that. What's that? I don't know. You go down the soap aisle and now there's blue and red and everything. And I guess they all look like jewels now because you have no concept of soap and dish soap, right? And in that way, you end up with what exactly? But when we take the Buddha's technique, or rather the tools that he offers in appropriate attention, we end up coming back to something quite different. Then when we go to the present moment, it's in a more targeted way, a more specific way, more purposeful way. And that's actually a good thing, to have purpose and direction in meditation. When you come to this moment right here and bring awareness to body and mind and the breath, all of that right here is done in a purposeful way. And that doesn't mean a strenuous way, that doesn't mean in a very like a task-oriented way, but not in a meandering sort of way. Like when we sit down to meditate, we're not just watching the clouds fly by. That can be peaceful and that can be relaxing, but at a certain point, we have to do more with the meditation than just that. To be following the Buddha's path, it has to be more than just the relaxation part, that there has to be this part that is really seeking to not only understand the mind and how it grasps and how it clings, but to also see the ways in which we can assist the mind in letting go of that grasping and clinging, and seeing what kind of qualities actually lead to more peace and more tranquility and more wisdom and discernment right now. Not in some distant future, not in some other lifetime, not in some other imagined retreat we might be able to have in the future once we assume that the virus is all cleared up and things are ready to go for retreats again. But right now, that's the power of the present moment. And when we bring ourselves to the present moment in that way, we end up finding something that, I would like to call relaxed effort. There's purpose, but it's not strenuous. There's determination and resolve, but it's not tiring or exhausting, because there's no sense that there's a finish line you're rushing to. You're simply dealing with what's coming up right now. I remember that when I was a martial arts student, many times there'd be people who always wanted to rush to be a black belt. And there were some dojos that I was a part of, some martial arts schools, where the teachers really didn't mind. Those guys that just wanted their black belt, I mean, they could pay their dues and they'll get their belt, whether or not they're actually good at what they know or what they're training to do. And so you'd find people that were just really determined on that black belt. They really wanted that black belt. And so they'd pay however much money, and they'd be there at the dojo nearly every single day, and they'd spend all this time with the teacher. And then sure enough, they'd have their black belt. And then once they got that black belt, they disappeared. Not realizing that for a lot of martial arts, at least some of the ones that I studied, that black belt is sort of like the preliminary stage. You do all this training to get to your black belt, and then that's when they tell you, well, this is when your training really begins. This is when you're really starting to understand the nuances and the techniques and the way things go. This is when you were a learner and now you're seeking to become a master. That's the difference. My attitude was quite different in that I wasn't really preoccupied in whether or not I was getting to that black belt. Funny enough, this example might break down because I didn't end up getting a black belt, but I did for a while get really good at martial arts. And the reason why was because I was focused on the techniques I was learning right then. Whatever it is that my sensei had to show me, that's what I would focus on. And that's what he wanted me to focus on, not what belt I had at the time. And so I noticed that there was this one point where I was in these classes, and there were these advanced students that only wanted to train with other advanced students. And I was the only more advanced student that continued to train with all of the beginners and all of the sort of mid-range students. And this actually made me better, I think. And I'm not saying this in any kind of egotistical way, but I saw the benefit that I began to apply to my approach to the Dharma as well, which is I kept having to go back to the basics over and over and over again, where all these other guys were trying to focus on all the advanced, really heady, complicated stuff all the time. I kept going back to the basics because I kept training with the new guys all the time. So we were going over posture again and different stances again, and how to do basic rolls and basic this, and how to do this takedown again and again and again. And by looking at that in that way, I ended up getting actually pretty good with it. And so when we take that back to the Dharma, there's that same mentality that we think that progress is this thing that happens because we study very strenuously, we apply all these crazy concepts, we learn all these deep philosophies, and it becomes this thing where we're trying to amass wisdom and ourselves become scholars. But then there's this reaction to that that's happened in the history of Buddhism, where it becomes completely anti-intellectual and anti-thought and anti-thinking. And with that goes out the window a lot of the tools that the Buddha has given us to address the present moment and to apply appropriate awareness, appropriate attention. And then what we're left with is something that looks a lot like just sitting around and not doing a whole lot, which means that when all the hard stuff does come up in the mind, there's no way of addressing what comes up other than to just watch it be there. And the Buddha saw that this kind of stuff happens in the mind. And in the Pali Canon goes so far as to say that there are some defilements in the mind that do go away simply by watching them. That in itself is a valid technique for some things that come up in the mind. That when they arise, you see that it's there, you apply your awareness and attention to it, and then it does just go away. But there are other things that require other techniques, that when various defiling thoughts come up, what needs to happen instead is a rush of energy of competing thoughts that are themselves skillful and wholesome, or perhaps redirecting the mind to something else happening in the body, applying attention to the sense bases and so on. All these different things that we're aware of when we learn about them, but also are able to use when we turn the attention to the present moment and actually see what's going on with real awareness, with real attention, which means we have to actually have some concepts along. What it means is that we actually have to be thinking while we meditate. We actually have to have the two qualities that the Buddha would bring up when talking about jhana, that there has to be directed thought and evaluation, that we can actually think our way into deeper states of meditation, which completely goes against what we've been told by a lot of different sources over the course of, 80 years plus maybe. So when we come back to this present moment and start looking at it and recognizing that it's not ordinary, well, it's not ordinary because there's all this potential in every moment. Every moment of our lives has the potential to be the moment that we awaken. But the way we do that is through the tools the Buddha has given us, which is rather more than simply being in the present, or simply being aware, or watching non-conceptually, or just simply accepting whatever is there in the present moment, but actually applying the teachings that we find in the Four Noble Truths to our meditation right here and right now. When I've done that, when I've been practicing that way, it gives me such a rush of energy and direction to my meditation. I don't feel like I'm simply wandering around and just watching the clouds go by, the river moving around, but rather that there's something that I can actually do with my mental states. And then when you actually do come across something that's really tough, some kind of Gordian knot in the mind, rather than having it be this thing that you don't know what to do with, you're just kind of moving it around hoping it goes away, you actually have the ability to pull it thread by thread until it comes undone, or in some cases, slice right through it. And that's far more useful, I think, far more practical in that way. All right, so this one got a little more philosophical than I had in mind, but I do think that when we talk about the present moment, it is useful. We do live very busy lives. We do live lives that give us so much things to focus on that we're not focusing on right now. But once we've learned that lesson and begin living in the present moment, we got to actually start doing something with that present moment. Abiding in the now alone is not enough, I don't think. And it's certainly not what I have found as the solution given by the Buddha in the Pali Canon. So food for thought in any case. I hope that was useful in some way to all of you. And I think I'll end it there. Thank you. Now, if there are any questions or comments, I'm noticing some stuff in the chat. Let me see. So was Socrates Dan Millman's Don Juan, as in Carlos Castaneda's works? Pretty close. Yeah. It does seem that like there was a period of time when a lot of those books were written. And a lot of similar books written out there for people looking for a guru, looking for some kind of master. Let me see. When does thought become toxic? Well, I think that when it comes to understanding which thoughts are worth developing and which thoughts are worth abandoning, we apply the Buddha's rationale. When we look at essentially the way things make us feel, like even the precepts really come down to our feelings and our perceptions. It's not so much that we do things because they are moral or make us superior. We do things a certain way because we see how we feel and how others feel when they're done. And the kind of thoughts that make us sad or frightened or angry, that lead to unskillful actions that themselves cause those same things in others, we can see that. And that requires reflection. In fact, one of the lessons that the Buddha gave to his son Rahula when he was very young was that same lesson on how to measure what actions are worthwhile. And that includes mental actions, which means thoughts. And he says to his son, like, well, what is a mirror used for? And Rahula says, well, it's used for reflection, sir. And the Buddha says, well, it's the same with the body and the mind, with our actions, with mental, verbal, and bodily action. We have to reflect before we act. And we apply that reflection not only to the past, but also to the present and to the future, to future action as well. We reflect and think on what the possible outcomes are to continuing in this mode of being, to continue in that way. And so we can see which thoughts end up being toxic in the sense that we see the effects they have. We're always looking at kama vipaka. We're always looking at action and consequence. What are the consequences to what's happening in the mind right now? And then we can begin to adjust course using the tools the Buddha's given us. Any other questions or comments? Selwyn, go ahead.
Hi, Steve. Thank you again for your talk. Let's see, let me gather my thoughts. One movie that I keep in mind about the practice is The Karate Kid, the original one, because that's the one that I saw, where he's doing things that he does not want to be doing. He wants to be doing the more advanced stuff. And I think for me, when I started to practice meditation and necessarily follow Buddhist principles, was I wanted the advanced, not necessarily I wanted the advanced status, I didn't want the present moment. I didn't want to be where I was. I wanted to be somewhere else. And what you were saying is about how we have to be in the present, not have to be, like it's practice be in the present moment, not where, I would say not where I want. Part of it is I don't like the present moment. So of course I don't want to be in the present moment. So part of it is not wanting to be in what the present moment feels like. Having said that, I just read something, and I don't know, I mean, I haven't verified it, that the brain, when we're looking at the present moment, there's only a small percentage of activity that actually is the eyes, the ears that are engaged, and a lot of the other activities coming from stored memory. So the brain is constructing things, not so much processing what is there. So where I'm going with this is, it does take a lot of practice to sort of shift that, I think. And it is possible to shift that. And I'm going here, but what I have read, and again, I haven't verified it, where people that practice meditation, and not meditation just sitting, but just, again, like keep practicing being on what is, not what I want it to be. There's a shift in their brain activity. So to summarize this is, being in the present moment is not so much a willful act, but a practice act. And it comes with time, like the Karate Kid movie. I may not like it, but eventually I have to trust the teacher that I will get there. What are your thoughts about that, I guess? Because I'm just saying things that I
Well,
read.
for starters, great choice in movie. I love The Karate Kid, man. I watch that movie all the time. Now, if you look back and watch those scenes again, part of the confusion for Daniel in that part of the movie is that he doesn't know why he's doing the things he's doing. He's there to learn martial arts, and this guy's having him like sand the floor and paint the walls and do all this other stuff. And he's like, his whole frustration is like, I don't see how this is useful. I'm supposed to be learning martial arts, and you're putting me to work. And what Daniel doesn't realize is that he's actually building muscle and tone, building endurance, creating muscle memory, and he's actually learning the proper techniques on how to block and how to move and how to stand, and all of those things were actually lessons. And the thing is, when we're coming to the present moment, that's when we want to apply various lessons. The problem is recognizing when something is a lesson and when it isn't, when something is actually a waste of our time, or rather when something should be applied now but not later. So if Daniel had only learned sand the floor and that was all he ever knew, but then he needs to come up and paint the wall or paint the fence or wax the car, but all he knows is sand the floor, well, now he's in trouble. And so that's the same idea too when applying this attention in such a way where it's just non-conceptual, accepting the present moment sort of attention. And the problem with it isn't that it's wrong to do so, because as I said, there are times when that is the appropriate response and that will solve the problem. The issue is thinking that that's the only tool that you've got, because eventually what will happen is that you're going to run out of stuff that's going to move out of the way simply because you're watching it or simply because you accept it. There's going to be other stuff that you have to work with that's going to be different than that. And so it's in our best interest to have more of the Buddha's tools for those moments. And so we want to make sure that we learn all of those techniques, even if they don't seem applicable right now. Well, when I meditate this way, it seems to be working. Yeah, and then until it doesn't. And so there's nothing wrong with putting on that tool belt and having plenty of slots to fill with tools. You never know when they might come in handy. And that's been my reaction as well to practicing over time, is that you end up needing to do something you didn't think you needed to do, or approach a situation in a certain way. All the acceptance in the world over time didn't do enough for my anger. I needed to start having other tools, for example, to really fix my anger issues that I had for most of my life. And that required something other than just being in the present with acceptance. That required really understanding the root source of my anger and why I cling to it in a certain way. That involves investigation and qualities of the mind, like actually using thought and evaluation. So I hope that addresses it. I'm seeing we're at noon, so I think we're pretty much done, but I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Bante, are you there?
Steven, I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah.
You shared a lot of perspectives I've been thinking about, and I really feel you're on the right track. And I look forward to talking to you more and other times.
Thank you, Pasquale. Steve, let's see. What would you say is the ultimate objective that keeps you focused on your path? The goal. Yeah. The Buddha talks about Nibbana as the ultimate peace, the ultimate happiness. And so he had that as the goal for not only monastics, but also lay people. And so, if you live as a lay person, it might be harder to do, but not impossible to do. And so, that's, for me, that's what keeps me going is Nibbana. Yeah. That's what I'm after. Nirvana, enlightenment. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm after. I'm after the big prize. And then if nothing else, I think we're supposed to do our chanting. I just don't know if Matashanti is still there. I don't know if they're having technical difficulties or not. So in the meantime, I don't know. I guess, yeah. Okay, yeah. All right, I guess we're wrapping up. Technical difficulties, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm going to sign off. Everyone, be
Okay.
well, be happy, and I look forward to seeing some of you in a couple of weeks when we'll actually be at the temple for Ulambana. Bye, everyone.